Melanin is a neurochemical that is produced in part through the pituitary and the pineal gland. They both play a central role in the production of melanin, which is ultimately responsible for the color that we have in our skin. Now, historically, it had always been thought that melanin played a significant role in the intellectual propensity of African people. For example, when you study some of the Greek writings on melanin or the color of Africans, many of the Greek philosophers believed that melanin played some sort of a role in how Africans had been able to create and develop some of the sciences that they had come to be known for. So melanin was always considered an intellectual sort of a chemical.
The pineal gland, which produces melanin, it's shaped like a pine cone. And the origin of the word pineal literally means resembling a pine cone. Now, in ancient symbolisms, the pine cone has always been represented because people knew the importance of the pineal gland as it related to melanin and the universe.
Melanin is a molecule, and the concept of melanin is it is black in its nature, and we find it in the cosmos, we find it in the heavens, we find it in water, we find it in land, we find it in everything that exists.
The sperm of the male and the egg of the woman, they're both layered with melanin, so that when the sperm penetrates the egg, there is a melanin explosion. And that melanin helps to formulate the fetus within that egg. And that fetus is literally coated with the melanin substance. And that melanin substance then goes on to form the brain and the central nervous system. So every human being begins with a melanin explosion.
Melanin is an intelligence. It's an intelligence because it is the dynamic, the primary dynamic in every part of the cell. It's a primary dynamic in the core of the human being as well as to the surface of the human being. Its intelligence is responsible for the forming of the nervous system. Every part of the nervous system has these little black dots all through it, which essentially carry information.
So melanin, from a physical standpoint, is that substance that accounts for what black people refer to as soul. We move differently, we walk differently, we talk differently because we have access to a different form of energy than other folk.
Not only is melanin a pigment, which is so obvious, but melanin as an intelligence is a communications module that essentially broadcasts as well as receives information by way of light and sound frequency signatures.
Scholars and scientists have been having conferences about melanin, to my awareness, at least since the 1920s. These scientists said that the pineal gland, they refer to the pineal gland as a vestigial organ. That is a calcified gland within the body that served no purpose. And it was only after the Vietnam War, in the late 60s and early 70s, that they began to rewrite their interpretation of the pineal gland. The reason for that was that a large number of African Americans fought and died during the Vietnam War. And whenever a soldier dies, there's an autopsy that's performed before their body is sent back to Dover Air Force Base. And what they discovered, what these physicians discovered, is that when they performed the autopsies, the 75 to 80% of the African-American soldiers had a large functioning pineal gland. The pineal gland is normally about the size of your thumb. So it was not a vestigial organ in 70 to 80% of African-Americans, but it is a calcified organ in 75 to 80% of people with European ancestry. So they began to reevaluate the pineal gland. They began to reevaluate melanin.
This evening we're going to talk about something called melanin. It's what everyone is concerned about in the world. It's what they have a meeting about every 3 to 5 years. Germany, Italy, France, the U.S., they meet every 3 to 5 years and have a melanin convention and discuss the latest research in melanin. They have never invited a black scientist to that meeting in history. So we have had our own melanin conferences where we discuss this information involving melanin. Melanin is commonly associated with the pigment that causes your skin to be brown. So we figure that that's what melanin is about. But it's a little more than just the pigment that makes your skin brown. It's what we call a chemical key to life. That's because of the high amount of melanin we have, which we sometimes take for granted. Melanin is the chemical key to life. There is nothing else to study in science but melanin. We call it chemi, which means black. The people who study melanin particles call what they're studying, the scientists call chemistry, what you call chemistry, the study of melanin particles that go around in an orbit, and we call them electrons, protons, solitons. Those are melanin particles. That's why we call it chemistry. And the country you come from is called Kemet, which some people call Egypt. There's nothing else to study but melanin. And if you study chemistry or heard of chemistry and haven't heard the word melanin, you have just been studying social science. You go into a classroom and you call it biology, but biology is the way melanin controls a cell. And we call that little melanin sitting in the cell the new sun, the nucleus. The new sun radiates information and tells the cell how to operate, how to think, how to digest. That's melanin. Biology is the study of melanin and how it communicates. There's nothing else to study if you're going into the living sciences.
It's interesting that out of all the cells studied in the body, the most important and the most common cell studied is the red blood cell. Next to that, or second, is the nerve cell or the neuron, and then thirdly is the melanocyte. Now, I think it's very interesting that at least on the news and in the newspaper, we are told about what blood cells do to some capacity and about different neurologic diseases, multiple sclerosis, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, etc. But now, I haven't heard in these general information centers that the third most intense studied cell is the melanocyte. Have you? But scientifically, though, when the money is looked at as to what parts of the body the most money and research is spent on, it's the red blood cell first, the nerve cell, and then it's melanin. For example, that because of this molecule and because of its relationship to us, it has to be addressed under all circumstances in every aspect of our life. This is not just something that colors our hair, colors our eyes, etc., but it actually is the foundation from which the cells of our bodies have originated. It's very interesting. They talk about something that happens within the first 3 days after conception, that something known as a neural crest forms. And this neural crest is responsible for producing our entire nervous system, the spinal cord, the peripheral nerves, and the brain. And whether this is completely formed properly or not depends on the presence of melanin. When melanin is not there or it is in abnormal amounts, then this is when we begin to have neurologic defects, retardation, and one of the most common problems with melanin deficiency is spina bifida. So cerebral dystrophy, cerebral palsy, all of these things happen to deal with the health and the amount of melanin that's present at the time of conception. All races on the planet have melanin, but its capacity to be produced, the type that's produced, and its capacity to interact with the external environment is a genetic decision. For example, what am I saying? It's interesting that melanin, as I said, does not originate from skin cells. It originates directly from the brain. So if you happen to be looking at yourself and you recognize that you are jet black in the mirror, and you recognize that for every melanocyte that you have, and normally in Africans we have somewhere between 1,000 to 1,500 melanosomes per square millimeter of skin, that you're actually looking at an external brain. So that means that if you are incredibly black, that when you look in the mirror, you're looking at an externalization of your brain. And I just want you to think about how awesome that is, because that means now that you have two brains. You have one that's outside that can see, feel, touch everything, plus you have one that's also in here, up at the top part of your body. Now it's very interesting because they did some experiments with animals, for example, that based on the eye, because the eye has only two primary colors. The eye is either naturally dark, brown, or black, or it is blue, naturally. Any other shades of color of the eye are a reflection of toxins that have been deposited upon the iris. So any hazel eye is a toxic condition. So you either have blue eyes or you either are supposed to have dark brown eyes or black. The black dark brown eye is a natural sunglass because on the top of the nerve from the back of the eye, it has been protected with melanin so that the capacity to look into the sun, the capacity to be exposed to ultraviolet radiation, the capacity to be exposed to cosmic waves, radio waves, etc., have much less effect directly on the nerves from a damaging perspective as opposed to that eye that is denuded or doesn't have any pigment. So therefore, it is quite sensible and intelligent for individuals that have hazel eyes or blue eyes that they must have some type of external protection across the eye when it is exposed to intense light.
I'm an anatomist, hematologist, microbiologist for many years, etc. And went to medical school and I looked at many cadavers in the head area where we do a montage of the sectioning of the brain, and the deeper we get into the brain, the more melanin we see, except in Caucasian bodies that we use, you don't see as much. So we're going to deal with the pineal gland. But before we do that, look at the slide on the wall. This is not the molecule called melanin. This is what the Caucasians have pieced together. As Phil and I were talking, they can construct this based on a pulse, and that pulse is like a heartbeat, so they can capture a pulse. Then they interpret that pulse, capture another, they try to interpret that, and then they put all that together. What this is showing is, if we look over on the part of the screen here, okay, I got it. All right, right here, can you see this?
Yeah.
All right, this says heme or bowel pigment. Heme is the color red of the red blood cells. It's the pigments of the red blood cell without the globin part. The globin part is the protein part. The heme is the pigmented part. So what happens when the red blood cells are worn out after about 120 days, I think it's less than that, but we have to use the standard number, the cells of the spleen located on your left side, the cells in there puncture a hole in the membrane of those old worn out red blood cells and then takes it out, goes into the bloodstream, over to the liver, and the liver takes it through biochemical changes, splitting off the globin part from the heme, and the globin is recycled to make more hemoglobin, and the heme is degraded by catabolic actions down to its pigment, which gives your urine your color and your feces its color. So they have put together in this so-called melanin molecule nothing but body pigments. That's not melanin. A lot of the melanin in your system, and especially EU melanin, which means good, efficient, proficient, and otherwise, that eumelanin that we have is dark brown to black. And there's a lot of sulfur in that chemistry that makes your skin brown to black or other parts of your body. The Caucasian people have a pheomelanin. The sister showed a slide with the spelling there. Pheomelanin has selenium as a part of its chemistry, which is a second type of sulfur. That's why theirs doesn't get black, except in certain parts. Can't get black in the skin because it's mainly Are they selenium type? And I did lots of researches with enzymes that have selenium at its core, and I didn't even know why. I was working for them with their stuff.
We know those theories, but we got to concentrate on the fact here. Melanin is the biochemical key to life. It helps you metabolize carbohydrates, causes you to use less energy to make energy, which we call conversion reactions. Less energy to make energy. We efficiently make energy because we have this melanin.
Because now when we look at the effect of what nicotine does to the melanin molecule, it's horrendous. Nicotine actually just about deactivates the melanin molecule. It actually causes a sludging effect, and it actually diminishes its capacity to actually even pick up frequencies of light to relay the information to the brain. Water, when it's in its normal state, is fluid. It'll go in any direction that it is exposed to unless you contain it, which is how your body's supposed to be. As soon as you drop the temperature, what happens? It gets stiff, rigid, and fixed. And that's the same effect that any cold environment has on us. We're not supposed to be stiff, rigid, and fixed, nor are we to expose ourselves to cold environments, because we do not have a circulatory system that supports our metabolism to do this. Because remember what I said, we have to have blood in two places at the same time. We have to have blood under the skin because of all this melanin to feed the second brain, and blood deep within to supply the deep organs. Now, unlike the African, if you put the Caucasian in ice, they do fine. That's why they were able to ski and play hockey and all the other stuff that they do. Because now all their blood is deep in the body. So therefore, even though it might be cold on the outside, they don't feel that very much because they don't have a blood supply that is taking a lot of information to the skin anyway. But the major areas of the body, their flexible joints, their liver, etc., is staying warm because all the blood is pooled there in their only circulatory system. So when I began to look at environment and its effect on the structures of bodies, and then why bodies were structured the way they were based on the functions they were to serve, then it got very clear to me as a physician that there were some serious problems in the healthcare system in relationship to honoring the uniqueness of an individual's body and what it was supposed to do. Now, how many of your physicians are telling you this? And how many of your physicians are able to basically tell you why there's certain food you should have, why certain vitamins you can't take, and most of all, why certain drugs are very dangerous for you because of these unique structures that you have? Now, you can go to your plant store or your botanical store, and they'll be able to give you this information for any particular plant. Chrysanthemums, roses, petunias, etc. They can tell you what to give them, what not, the food, etc. that they should have. You can go to your pet shop, and they can tell you why French poodles have to have a certain type of food with certain type of protein in them and a certain type of fat concentration, whereas a German Shepherd has to have something totally different. But why not for humans? Now, I thought that was incredible, that we have ecology for pets, ecology for animals, and there's no ecologic system created right now that's practiced to make sure that each unique type of human being maintains and stays the best that it can be. So now, what do you do then if you are paying into and visiting a system that has not seen you or thought of a need to give you the best information for you so that you can be the best? Well, you have a lot of choices. The simplest, obvious two is that you can then demand that the system give you that, or you can do the study on your own and give it to yourself. And so that's why I felt that it was extremely important to put this information down so that you could have it to make some decisions about how you wanted to continue to treat yourselves. Because what is being offered to us and available at this point in time is not honoring the unique attributes and principles that we have, which is why they just tell you right up front, you all don't seem to do well when you come here to get our medicine, etc. Okay, but now they never told you why that you didn't do well. But now you can have the answer. There's a tremendous amount of information to let you know why.